Thanks, Brandis. Public corruption, gun violence, financial crimes, homegrown terrorism. These are just a selection of the cases brought in the last 4 years by the U.S. Attorney's Office, highlighted by a major bribery case involving ComEd and implicating former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. There's been so much activity out of that office that Illinois' two U.S. senators intervened to keep current U.S. Attorney John Lausch on the job despite the change in presidential administrations. And joining us to talk about all these big cases and more is John Lausch, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. U.S. Attorney Lausch, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me tonight, Paris. Good to be with you again.
It's good to have you, and I want to start with violent crime. As you know, Chicago's on pace to see more than 700 homicides. That's up 56% over 2 years ago. From your vantage, are there clear, traceable causes to this surge?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I could point to a traceable cause, but one thing we've clearly seen in the violence is that the offenders are very emboldened, is the best word, and I've used it over and over again, and others have as well. You know, as one example, we charged a murder case the other day, a murder of native racketeering, and it involved a murder of someone in broad daylight in the middle of the afternoon. We see carjackings that take place at all hours of the day, and so that's just one of the things that we've seen with the offenders. They don't seem to be concerned about the consequences of their action. And that leads to really bold actions taking place at all parts of the city.
And the mayor and the Chicago police superintendent have pointed their fingers at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and the Cook County court system for what they see as lax sentencing and lax prosecution of gun offenders. Do you see those problems at those agencies perhaps causing criminals to feel emboldened?
Well, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of factors that come into play. I mean, there certainly are things outside the enforcement end. And things that we as prosecutors do not control, or law enforcement frankly doesn't control either. But from the prosecution end, I mean, the one thing that we've emphasized on the federal side, and that I've emphasized in particular, given that I spent a lot of time doing violent crime cases back when I was just a regular prosecutor, is really how important it is that we provide a baseline level of accountability, right? I mean, we need to ensure that when people are driving violence, they're pulling the trigger, they're possessing the guns illegally, they're putting guns into the hands of people who shouldn't have them, that we hold those people accountable. And that's really one of the key things that we've done federally, is ensuring that we're doing our part to help in that regard.
And the Chicago Tribune published a story that traced a stolen gun from Wisconsin to 27 shootings in Chicago. Do federal prosecutors have the tools to effectively go after gun traffickers when you still do see so many guns winding up illegally on Chicago streets?
Well, we certainly have tools. I mean, I think any prosecutor would tell you and law enforcement officer would tell you that we always like more tools, but we do have plenty of tools now. Some of the things that ATF employs, such as NIBIN tracing, which really deals with the tracing of ballistics from weapons that are fired, is how we're able to determine that one firearm was involved in 27 separate shootings. And that's really a tremendous tool to be able to tie different shootings to a particular weapon and to a particular offender ultimately that we can charge in court. And one other thing I would say with that, I mean, the firearms trafficking and our efforts and our renewed efforts now to really prosecute more people for that is really just one prong of what we do. Even on the gun side of the house. I mean, there's the illegal transfer, but the illegal possession of firearms is something that's critically important, because what we see is that most of the shootings that happen are people who shouldn't have the guns in the first place, right? And they know that. They know they're a felon and they shouldn't be illegally possessing those. And then ultimately, the people that are shooting the firearms, right, that are killing people, those are, kind of the worst of the worst, and those are the offenders that we spend most of our time on.
And in that case, you have different statutes at the federal side than on the state side, so you can go after gang members for racketeering, RICO cases, although we've seen gangs splinter over the last decade or so, and homicide rates still remain high. So going after those cases, prosecuting those cases, is that effective in reducing gun crime?
It is. I mean, all three of the things that I've talked about, and just to pick up on your point of the gang cases, right? The organizational gang cases is something we still continue to do. That's critically important. To do cases, illegal possession of firearms is really important as well. And the same thing for the transfer. I mean, we need we really need to work at every particular level, because the problem is so acute, especially right now, that we've seen over the last couple of years.
I want to move on to the other big prong, well, several prongs in your office, but public corruption cases always been a hallmark of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Illinois. The big one, ComEd, allegations of bribery, former top officials of that company, lobbyists from that company. They've pled not guilty to those charges. Public official A, identified as the former Illinois House Speaker, implicated but not charged. Do you anticipate more indictments coming in this big case?
So, given that it's an ongoing case, in an ongoing investigation, it really wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment any further on that, other than to say that our investigation, it is continuing.
But what we're looking at in this case is the trading of official business, the trading of jobs, some of those non-performing jobs in exchange for legislation that was favorable to ComEd, correct?
That the allegations and the indictments that we've brought to date do allege that conduct. Exactly.
And do you all the folks that have been indicted pled not guilty? Do you anticipate cooperation from some of these defendants?
Well, that's actually, just to correct you on that. I mean, there is.
I'm sorry, ComEd did strike the deferred prosecution, but some of the other officials,
agreement,
correct.
right? And then there is one of the individuals charged in the case did plead guilty to an information related to the same conduct, and is cooperating.
I stand corrected. And do you anticipate any more cooperation?
Again, wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on that, given that this is all ongoing. But we obviously welcome anybody, whether charged or uncharged, to continue to help us in prosecuting cases like this. And
speaking of public corruption, we had a recent conviction of a former alderman, Ricardo Munoz, the 3 current aldermen, by my count, under indictment: Kerry Austin, Ed Burke, Patrick Thompson. We've reported an FBI probe into Alderman James Gardner. What do all these cases say about the current state of city council and public corruption?
So again, without kind of directly talking about any of the cases that are charged or any of the other things that you pointed out, which may or may not be under investigation, I do think it's important for public officials to know that as the FBI and our other law enforcement partners in our office, we receive allegations regarding conduct, and we take a look at that and we scrub it and we try and figure out whether there is illegal conduct that's going on. And it's something that has happened in the office from the time when I was a regular prosecutor up until now, and it's going to continue to be a priority in our office, given that the problem that we see in Chicago is a stubborn one of public officials who from time to time they're using their public office for their own private gain.
Do you see this problem as worse now than it's been in the past, or just you said it's stubborn, so kind of about the same?
Yeah, I don't know that me or anybody else can really describe worse one way or the other. I mean, there has been a long history of corruption inside Illinois and inside the Chicago area. So I don't know that I could say one way or the other whether it's worse or better now.
All right, I want to talk about your term. You were appointed by the former president. You stayed on despite the change in presidential administrations. You serve at the pleasure of the president. The 2 senators from Illinois talked about having you stay on in the interim until they find a successor, although one of them, Senator Durbin, told us today they haven't even started that process. So what is your status and how long do you plan to stay?
Well, it sounds like you hit the status right on the head. I mean, this is a great job. I love this job. It's such a pleasure to work with such fantastic people, inside my office, both lawyers and staff members. And so, like you said, I serve at the pleasure of the president. Hearing nothing, I will continue to keep my head down and keep working at 219 to do what we can for the people of the Northern District.
All right, U.S. Attorney John Lausch, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right, thanks.